Alex here with a legal nuts and bolts video on creating bias. It's going to be one of those videos with a title that has a question mark attached to the end of it, and it's sort of inspired by similar videos. For example, creating emergencies, question mark, which tells people to not do this or to not cause this to happen. Same thing with this video, except I'm going to more so take the approach that this isn't actually a thing. You can't create bias. Bias is either there or it isn't. And it is something that is there based on prejudicial, I guess you could call it things, like, for example, race or religion or gender, things like that. You come into the courtroom and the judge hasn't even looked at any of the details of the case. They decide because you're a father, you're going to lose. Because you're a Christian, you're going to lose. Because you're an atheist, you're going to lose. Those are bias. Those are examples of bias. It has nothing to do with the facts of the case, the law. It just has to do with the judge's preconceived ideas on certain things. That's bias. What is not bias? Everything else. There are some people who will be really upset because their judge has decided that they don't like them and they think that's bias. If a judge doesn't like you, they think that's bias. But the problem is that the judge has decided they don't like them because of certain things that they've done. It's not because of race or religion or any of those other examples that I've given. It's because of the abuse that they committed to the child. We're going to go ahead and use child custody examples because that's where most of my viewers that's the perspective most of my viewers have when it comes to their own personal cases. So you've got a parent who's neglected their child, who has abused their child. And the judge, doesn't like them because those are horrible things according to what the judge, how they feel as a human being. But the thing is, those are not preconceived notions. Those are not something that the judge has attributed to you. Those are things that the judge has attributed to certain ideas. The idea that child abuse is bad, you could say that's a preconceived notion because they had that idea before you came into the courtroom, but that isn't really attached to you as a person. That's just an idea, and a lot of people think that. Probably every single person, in this country thinks child abuse is bad, and you can say that that's unfair, but the courts are not going to recognize it as such. The courts have a different definition of bias, and that's the definition that they're going to follow. So if you have done certain things that the court doesn't like, that's not bias. That's just them doing their job. They're making observations as to what you're doing, and they're going to make a decision based on it. Then there are other things that aren't really supposed to come into play, but you can't really call it bias because you've kind of taken all of these steps to make that happen. And what that would do is that would create a sort of out if the courts allowed somebody to take certain steps. Let's go ahead and use an example because I'm not really going to be clear until I do this. One very common example is somebody goes online and does like a petition to remove their judge from the bench, or they go on social media and call their judge all these horrible names. When you go into courtroom following having done those things, you can say, this isn't fair, you're biased now because of these things that I've posted online. And in a sense, it's true because the court shouldn't be making decisions as to your children or to anything in your case based on what you have called them online. That's not really relevant to the case. But on the other hand, if that was something that the courts allowed people to do, then people could just decide, hey, I don't like my judge, I want to get rid of them, so I'm going to say all these crazy things about them online, and then go into court and say, look, since I posted all these things, now you have to get off the bench. They don't like this idea of people being able to do things that then kicks their judge off the bench or triggers a recusal, because then people are going to do it on purpose because they don't like their judge. I have a video, I can't remember even the name of the video now, but actually, it's not a specific video. It's kind of something that I've discussed in multiple different videos. This idea that, oh my God, things didn't go well, all I need is a new judge, is a very common idea. When it comes to child custody and divorce actions, a lot of people think that's going to solve their problem. People will go into court, they will lose, and the first reaction many of them have is, all I need is a new judge. And so the judicial system is very cognizant of this, and so they are careful not to create precedent that allows a litigant to take actions that triggers a recusal. If a recusal is to occur in a case, it's going to need to occur based on something that the litigant didn't do. Otherwise, you're going to have what I described earlier, people doing stuff on purpose to get judges changed out. So bias is a very good example. If a judge has actual bias, maybe you ran into their car when you guys were students at UNLV, and now 2 decades later you're in their courtroom and they're their judge and you're just somebody else. That might be a bias issue, because they might remember, hey, this is the guy that hit my car, I don't like them. Or maybe there's implied bias. Okay, so for implied bias, your opponent is the judge's sister or aunt or mother or father. Those are things that are not really in your control as a litigant. And so for a judge to be recused for those reasons makes sense. For a judge to be recused because you posted things online about him, it might sort of be understandable, because now they're not going to, I'm not going to say they're not going to. Some judges are great at setting that stuff aside. But the idea is now that they might not be able to treat you fairly, it's not going to work, because that's something that you as a litigant caused to happen. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of the phases in the judicial disciplinary process in Nevada. The first phase is actually a phase where you are not allowed to tell the judge that you reported them. Phase one of reporting a judge to the Commission on Judicial Discipline is a confidential phase. They look at your allegations quietly. They do not tell the judge that they're investigating them. And there is a statute that says you are not allowed to tell the judge that you have filed a complaint. A lot of people think, well, why is that? Why are they trying to keep it secret? The reason they're trying to do that is because if they didn't do that, people could then say, hey, I filed a complaint against you, get off my case. And it'll cause people to file complaints against a judge, not because they have any merit, but just because they want the judge off the case. And so they have the first step, which is to be quiet and not say anything. And if they think that there is something there, then it goes into phase two, which is investigation. And then they'll actually let the judge know that that they're being investigated. And then at that point, most judges will recuse themselves. And that's the sort of balance to that, or you could call it a balance to the whole concept of somebody just deliberately filing a complaint, not because they care what happens to the judge, but because they just want the judge off their case. They want a different judge. So you as a litigant cannot do things that create bias. And I'm going to put it in quotation marks because it's not really the definition of bias, but it's what a lot of people say is bias. You can't do things to create bias and then point the finger at the judge and say, now that you're biased because of things I've done, get off my case. Again, the way I described the way I sort of use the word bias in those examples isn't really how it works, but I'm using it that way because that's where a lot of people sort of come from when it comes to this topic. I'm not going to say it's a lot of people in the sense that it's everyone or even most people, but at the same time, based on my observations, I can't even say it's a rare occurrence. There are a lot of videos out there online, and it's uncommon, but it's not that rare. It's a thing. There are parents who have their videos online and they feel the judge's bias because of how upset or angry the judge is with them. But the judge is at that point based on things they've done. It's not bias. You have to be careful the actions that you take both inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom when it comes to your case. If it's outside the courtroom actions that are affecting child welfare and stuff like that, and you're in a child custody case, that's relevant. You have to be careful of the actions that you take, because if you take those actions and the judge reacts because those are affecting your case, they're damaging to your case, they are well within their rights to do that. And in fact, they're well within their rights to stay on the case. There are a lot of people who have, I won't say a lot, again, I'll go with uncommon. I think that's the best word. It's uncommon, but it's not rare for people, based on some of the videos that I've seen online, to do things that really enrage the judge. And in many cases, the judge cannot hold back. They are furious. And a lot of people think, oh, well, now that I triggered an emotional response, that's bias. No, it's still not bias. The judge is reacting in rage based on horrible, horrible things that they perceive you to have done. So they're not going to look at that through the lens of bias. They're going to look at that through the lens of doing their job. I have seen you do these things. These are really bad, and I am now angry. So I think I'm getting the point across with this video. There is a distinction between actual bias and a judge becoming angry based on actions that have been taken in a case. They're allowed to do that, and in fact, they should stay on the case, because getting off of the case will, again, just encourage people to do outrageous things, trigger an emotional reaction, and thus get rid of their judge, which I've already said this. In fact, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here on it. which is a thing that a lot of people think is okay. I mean, a lot of people really do think that if I'm having problems in my court case, all I really need is a different judge. And I've talked about this on many occasions, and I've said it till till I was blue in the face. For most people, maybe 95% of people, changing the judge changes nothing. I'm not going to say it's all of them. There are rare situations where they really do just have a problem with this judge, and it's just they're going to need a different judge. But it's very rare. It's usually not going to fix anything. And in fact, now that I think about it, a lot of the videos that have kind of popped into my head that sort of led me to, create this video for you guys right now, a lot of the hearing videos that I have seen have involved a lot of judges, and the situation doesn't get any better for that litigant. So I really do think that this video is going to be helpful to my viewers, but I would like to get some feedback on it. If anyone here is going through a situation like this where they have an ex, or where if it's not even a child custody case, if it's just an ordinary case, ordinary civil or even criminal case, and they think that something like this is going on, that their opponent is trying to trigger recusals by doing outlandish things, by pointing to emotional reactions from the judge that are based on actions they've taken. And anyone has that kind of experience, post it down in the comments below, because I'd like for my viewers to see that this is a thing, that this does happen, and that some of us are going up against opponents. I'm not anymore. My case is completely and totally closed. But some of the other viewers are going up against opponents who really do think that they're not that bad of a person. Their judge is just out to get them, and they just need to change the judge to solve all their problems. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video now, and I will see you guys next time.